Welcome to Twin Peaks Conversations, a new monthly podcast, although this is a bonus episode, so expect another one of these in about a week this time. Before beginning my conversation with Ben Durant and Bryon Kozaska, authors of the book Twin Peaks Unwrapped and hosts of the podcast with the same name, I just wanted to include the format of these conversations and offer an update on my work, including my approach to Journey Through Twin Peaks. First of all, Twin Peaks Conversations will be split between two platforms. There will be an initial discussion premiered on YouTube, usually a Monday near the end of the month, and these will be audio only, aside from some illustrations during the intro and outro. Simultaneously, I'll offer the other part of this discussion, at minimum half and sometimes as much as 2/3 or 3/4, depending how long the conversation goes, exclusive to $5 a month patrons as a monthly reward for that tier. As for how my work is going behind the scenes, I'm currently in the third phase of my Path Back to Journey Through Twin Peaks series. Composing a backlog for the rest of 2021 before moving on to 2022, and eventually, when I have a good bit of runway as security, new Journey videos. I'm 13 steps into the path and 24 steps away from resuming Journey. You can check out the whole span of that with the schedule linked below, as well as the Twitter threads in the description to this video. So you can keep track of all of that there. At this current moment, right now, I'm engaged with putting together my other Twin Peaks conversation for September. I'll be speaking to that guest within hours. And after that, I'll be repackaging some old patron podcasts for public release over the next few months. So that's where I'm at in the journey to Journey. So for a few minutes, I just want to lay out the work I've been up to. I'll have illustrations to kind of show you what it looks like, and then we'll move on to the interview. This particular intro update is going to be longer than it will be for future Twin Peaks conversations, not only because it's the first one, but also because the period from late August to early September was probably the busiest in my online history, although the bulk of these pieces were created in advance, sometimes far in advance. So these include the kickoff to my monthly Olympics series, covering documentaries on almost all of the Olympic Games in the lead up to the Winter Olympics in February 2022. My Mad Men viewing diary with entries going up every Monday. It just wrapped season 5 and it's now exploring season 6 episode by episode. A written essay detailing my process of creating Journey Through Twin Peaks Part 5 from 2015 to 2021. Public podcasts on Akira Kurosawa's High and Low, Stanley Kubrick's Eyes Wide Shut, which is a conversation with Andrew Cook, and drawing comparisons between David Lynch's Eraserhead and Inland Empire, and also previewing 3 new podcasts I'm launching in October. I made a guest appearance on the podcast Peaks Chats to discuss the killer's reveal in Twin Peaks, and the finale and roundup of my Journey Through Twin Peaks mini chapters on season 3 just went up. I've been re-releasing these over YouTube all summer long for the 4th anniversary of season 3. I posted 3 monthly $1 a month patron podcasts, which included Twin Peaks cinema comparisons to the Dutch thriller The Vanishing, Nicholas Ray's dark Hollywood classic Bigger Than Life, and Lynch's own debut Eraserhead, alongside Twin Peaks reflections on various characters, locations, and storylines, readings from my own archive, and segues into listener feedback and political reflections, all in those main $1 a month podcasts. And then finally, as if all of that wasn't enough, my $5 a month tier concluded the 2.5-year super in-depth Lost in Twin Peaks podcast. I did this with a 12-part, 14-hour series just on Firewalk with me. It's broken into the introduction, production context, historical context, readings from the critical reception and fan reactions. Both of those episodes are open to the public since they're archive material. My own reactions and fans today and the feel of the film. The structure and subplots and the more peripheral details of the film, Laura Palmer, the mythology, the mysteries, and readings from my archive, which are split into 2 episodes. Both of those are open to the public too. That's my own previous work on Firewalk with Me, which is pretty extensive, so I put it in an oral format there. And finally, ending all of that with a season 3 spoiler discussion related to Firewalk with Me. So again, this is just my recent work. There's also an archive on my site spanning back to 2008 if you want to dive deeper, but that's 5 minutes. Like I said, longer than our usual intros to this, but I just wanted to get established as we move on to the new format. And that's what I've been up to. But let's shift our focus to Ben and Bryon so we can survey their work on Twin Peaks, which stretches out over the past 6 years, kind of different eras of Twin Peaks now when we look back on it. Before season 3, during season 3, after season 3, during the pandemic. And we'll have a lot to discuss about that, as well as some possibilities of what the future may hold. So stay tuned. Here we go. to start off with, I just want to introduce you guys to the audience. I say that a little bit tongue in cheek because you guys have a pretty big following. So most of them probably already know who you are. But just tell them about your podcast, what you did, and how it led to this book that you've just written in 2020, Twin Peaks Unwrapped.
Well, yeah, so I'm Ben Durant, and we've got Bryon here, and we've been doing a Twin Peaks Unwrapped podcast for 6 years, and probably maybe I don't know, we would say the 4 years in, or as 5 years in, we really started just talking about that we could make a book out of some of the material we've already gotten for the podcast. We had done a lot of interviews with writers and actors and directors of Twin Peaks, cast and crew. And I think we thought it would be really cool to have some of those interviews in a book format, but also expand about that, get some new interviews and include the community, the Twin Peaks community, and have them be a part of the book as well. So I think that's what would happen is we put out a book in Twin Peaks Unwrapped, and we've retired. We ended the show after 253 episodes or so,
right? Right. And to piggyback on what you said about us wanting to do the book, the story, that's the story Ben tells. The real story was a year before that, I get a text message around the holidays. We were taking our yearly break. We pre-record all our shows for the holidays, and we take off the last 2 months of the year. And I get a text from Ben saying, I'm thinking about writing a book. And I say, really? And he says, well, I've always wanted to do this, but I feel like now that we have all this material, it gives us enough for a book. And I wrote back, my gut reaction was no, which was the wrong answer at the time. I was just like, that scares me, so no. I don't think I'm like, I don't know, Ben. That seems like a lot of work.
We're both not scholarly people in the sense that we're really writers. That's not our background. I mean, we have video production backgrounds and we like visual type things, but we're not, we don't write essays and journals and all that. So that's not really our thing.
Yeah. So it scared me. So but Ben was persistent, and the following year, like 1 year later, he said, I think we could do this. And I you know what? I took a step back and I thought about it. I think I even said to him, let me think about this. And I said, let's do it,
And Bryon, the funny thing was, I actually originally just wanted the interviews. Like, I just want, like, say, hey, it's basically just having what we've already gotten in new interviews. And I think, Bryon, it was you who was like, if we're going to do this book, we have to include ourselves. So I think, I was just going to be like, I just want the interviews in book form so that if I'm like, we got Kyle MacLachlan to be able to actually have that to read it. I thought it was really cool.
Yeah. And I think once they said yes, that opened the floodgates for our creativity to kind of come together on this project. And we had our yearly Denny's retreats. we were meeting the first year we started working on the book, we were meeting monthly at Denny's. And I said to Ben, I go, you know what? We have to get together every Sunday at a library somewhere. We have to. If we're going to get this done by the end of the year, because that was our original goal to have it done before Christmas.
And this was 2018?
2019.
We were probably at the beginning. Were we at the beginning of 2019? We had a year or so?
Yeah.
And of course, we never would have gotten done, Bryon, if you didn't say that, because as much as I think I like schedules and I like to organize things to some degree, I am also a procrastinator, and I can have a big talk and be like, yeah, let's have these big ideas. But when it comes to do the work, it takes a lot out of me to do that.
I was able to finally read you guys' book. I'd been putting it off because I wanted to wait until right before we were going to have our conversation, but I thought it would be in like 2020. So, I can understand the projects and procrastination and everything getting pushed back. And I really enjoyed the structure that you guys chose to it. And I was interested in finding out how you came to that. I'm talking about how each chapter was on a different episode or film, but within that, it was divided into like 4 sections. So I think it was like a description of the episode, but not like a description per se. I think it was you guys talking back and forth about what interested you. Like it wasn't a synopsis, and then it was interviews with different people about that episode, different actors and crew members that you talked to, and then like reactions from fans, and then you guys would come in to say your favorite scene and quote. I think I have that right. But what was it that spurred that approach versus just sort of transferring the podcast material into the book in some other way?
Ben?
Well, yeah, I mean, since we knew, I think partly, I think we knew that when we knew that it was going to be us, I started thinking of it as sections to some degree, that like when we were going to be a part of it. And like my brain kind of works where having I like having it broken up into episodes. It was challenging to say, would I be able to get 30 different things, like episodes in the movie and the parts, and would I be able to fill it all up? But I thought it was like, it would be nice to be able to have a timeline of going to each episode. So that kind of, and then I think, I mean, it's funny with the, it's funny, but well, here's, there's, when you look at other books, I think that sometimes helps too. It partly had to do how the interviews were, and I could see in my head where Sherilyn Fenn said something and Kyle could respond to it, and I could see kind of that, almost like having a conversation. And I thought it was a beautiful thing where I could see where they could work off each other, and we could kind of do that throughout the book. And then I really love the community. Our show was on. I mean, it really is based on the podcast, and it really isn't. I think Bryon and I would say it's not always about us, it's about the community, and we're always more enjoying when other people like you, Joel, who comes on and shares your experience with Twin Peaks. So I think that was the idea, was that we wanted to include the community. I think it's even more special people who are getting the book to be able to say, hey, I was a part of that. A lot of the community would be able to get this book and say, hey, there's a part where I'm featured in this, and I get to share how I got into Twin Peaks or whatnot. So that was it. And yeah, and there was other, like, X-Files had like a log line. And for me, the word log line, it's a short, like, I forgot the actual definition, but it's a short, they use it really in movie terms as a really short snap, a description of the episode. And so I think that was the first thing, the log line.
Yeah, yours were really short and economical. They reminded me of how people would talk about the Mad Men episodes.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't watch them when they were on, but apparently they would be like, Don meets someone or something. Like yours were a little more specific, but they really managed to boil down these crazy convoluted episodes into like one bite-sized idea.
Yeah. And it really, I mean, with a book, you're paying for each page. You're paying for each page. And so when it came, I would have, if in my world, I would have wanted it to be 1,000-page book, but that's not realistic. I mean, like, it comes back for the publisher. I mean, like when you have like Scott Ryan involved, and say it has to say that X amount of pages and stuff. So that's something too. Is like, I'm not going to spend we're not going to spend the whole time describing an episode. I think if you for fans, all they need is that, Laura Palmer's funeral, and right away you kind of remember that episode enough to say, okay, I can dig into this episode and start discussing it.
Right.
Yeah. So I guess that's it. Anything else you want to say about that, Bryon, about the structure of putting it together? We actually did do different parts. I mean, when we were putting the book together, we would record stuff kind of like we have our usual podcast discussion, and then we would break it up and discuss. I mean, we would take on different parts. I was very much into interviews and having them have a conversation. And Bryon, you were doing different things while I was doing that.
Right. Yeah. I mean, also, I think one of the coolest parts is that and I think this was Ben's idea, but having the community have a part in each chapter. The cherry on top was a quote or something from the community, and sometimes that was from a celebrity. Sometimes that was from just someone from the community that we all know, and I think that was so great. It was just like everyone's love of Twin Peaks got to shine at the end of each chapter, and I think that's kind of like I said, it's the cherry on top of every chapter, I think.
Yeah,
I like that you described it that way, because I think often it was just one person, right? Like it was like one person would kind of get the coda on the chapter.
Yep.
Yeah. And it wasn't even set up in a way that like we told them, hey, we're gonna you do part 8 of the return. It was everybody just did whatever they wanted to write. and I would get somebody who was really excited about part 8. And so that, like, well, I guess that fits right in there with the end of part 8 of
Yeah.
that
Yep.
chapter.
Were there other approaches that you experimented with along the way, or did you kind of settle on that formatting choice pretty early on? I thought, that it was interesting, for example, that, like we said, you didn't really have the synopses. You focused more on finding moments and observations than trying to be like completely thorough, which I think was a good choice because I view this as kind of part of a trilogy with Reflections and
Mm,
by Brad Dukes and John Thorne's book, The Essential Wrapped in Plastic. I think all three of you guys sort of did oral histories,
yeah.
but Brad's is more strictly oral history, and it goes really only through the series. It doesn't cover the film. John's is some oral history and then some analysis and stuff, and it goes only up to Firewalk with Me. And then you guys get to include all of it all through season 3, and you really like the oral history is sort of like maybe a third of it in a way or
Mm.
something. So I just thought that was interesting. Did you think I guess A, did you think of their books well structuring in terms of what you did and didn't want to do? And B, did you think of other approaches or consider them before you settled on what you did?
And Bryon, I feel like when we were early on, when we were at Denny's, we had the structure, like,
Yeah. Yep.
and
Mhm.
I don't even know if it was we were considering an oral history, but it is or ours is an oral
Right.
history. But I think it was partly again modeled off of our podcast. Like we said, okay,
Yes.
a regular podcast, we have our own feelings about an episode, and then we have people who come on the show who share their thoughts, and then we have a broader the audience that listens to the podcast. And so I think that was always kind of the model. I feel like before we even started writing, we were at Denny's sketching it out, and that was pretty much how we outlined it.
We
I don't
we
know if we
did,
changed.
Ben. I'm really trying to reach back into my memory bank and remember there was some parts that we didn't do because of
Yeah,
time and
right.
because of page count. But you did have an idea where you were going to put in like fun facts, or
Oh yeah.
remember, like there was an idea in there that
I
we
had a
just
couple.
didn't
Yeah,
we
I had a
couldn't
couple
do.
ideas. I mean, I wanted to be everything. I wanted to have fun facts, like
Yeah.
little known facts, but I also had things where I wanted to show archives of old. I mean, there's a tiny bit, but not much. But I wanted to have a lot of archives of like board games of Twin Peaks, or just different things like that to highlight like history of. But
Yeah.
there wasn't room, and like we had other people that I would have liked to have included, and yeah, I mean, gosh, yeah, there was a lot. I mean, there was the Twin Peaks history, and you can even see that where in the beginning, I think that I wanted to get newspapers and spend more time with.
Hmm. You
uh
found a lot of stuff for that.
yeah, I wanted
Because
even
as
more though.
somebody who's gone on those deep dives and like rounded up tons of media,
Yeah,
there was stuff in there. I'm like, where did he find this? Wow,
I know.
a
I was
lot of
going through
stuff.
newspapers, and I had. I mean, I actually wish if it could have been double the size of the book, it would have been great to have more newspapers to say, "Oh, look what was happening here," because things that we forgot about or we didn't know about, and some of them are rumors, so you don't know was it factual. And we would have
Yeah.
had to go on and interview more people to get facts
Yeah.
about it.
Yes, and Ben, you know what I'm remembering now? Yeah, we had like these newspaper. We
Yes,
were we were looking up for every episode a newspaper, the write up, and then you got
around
to the
that
Yeah.
time,
point.
that week. So let's say it's that week the episode
Yeah,
airs.
yeah.
There'll be people writing about it and stuff. Yeah,
But then
And were you doing it
as
all online or?
yeah,
yeah,
but Joel, it got really hard near the end.
tedious. Yeah,
I
nobody.
was I
Yeah.
was looking it up. I remember me and Ben at the library, and
Yeah.
I'm like literally going, I cannot find anything. And then when I do find something, it is negative.
Right,
Like it was
Oh, yeah.
not.
the media's done with
Yeah,
Twin Peaks by then.
yeah,
Some of those are the most, I don't know if fun's the right word, but interesting to read at times,
yeah.
seeing how angry people got. There was one article in particular struck me, and I have like a vague memory of maybe having seen this somewhere, but I don't think it's in my media roundup that I did years ago. And it was called "Hype Over Twin Peaks Fails to Acknowledge Co-Creators' Contributions." I just thought that's interesting that they were
Oh yeah,
writing
Mark
that all the
Frost, right?
way back then, because it's still a
Wow.
theme now. People saying, "Gee,
Yes,
Frost Frost doesn't get enough credit or something." But even at the
right.
time, people were noticing that.
I think it was a lot of the history, like yeah, if we could have doubled the size, there'd
Yeah.
be more history of Twin Peaks.
Oh yeah.
What was your favorite thing that you discovered through that research process? Your favorite discovery?
Oh gosh.
Oh man.
I know. I'm trying to think that. Oh gosh.
I'll
Um,
expand it a little too. It could be through a newspaper article or through maybe an interview, something somebody revealed to you that
Oh,
surprised you or gave you a new perspective.
I mean, I think we could talk about this freely now, Ben. But I mean, when we had Kyle on and him mentioning how Cooper, what was the big quote? Like how he said he was more present in season 3 than we really thought of,
yeah, that
right?
was really
Right.
exciting,
Yeah.
right? I mean, like, yeah, the big reveal I think you can say is that he actually becomes present uh, with the one-armed man. Like he is our Cooper, and he's having dialogue with the one-armed man.
Yeah.
And like, how does that change the whole thing of season 3? Like, does that if he really just snapped out of it and then went back to
It's
Dougie mode, and that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
it's surprising too because the I think Sabrina Sutherland had said, "Oh, there basically are no missing pieces
Mm,
on
right.
season 3," which it sounds like it could be a cover story, but it's also pretty plausible considering how Lynch finally kind of had free reign to throw everything, not to have like a length that something had to be cut down to, because every movie he's made has had like hours of missing footage,
True.
but it was
Yeah.
usually, I mean, I think he was wise sometimes to cut them out, but I think if he hadn't been restrained, he may not have.
Right.
And for a TV show, I think it works better to have all of the missing pieces in. So I'm
Yeah.
kind of glad that it came out that way. But I thought that was funny.
I think maybe
One,
what Sabrina means is that all the scenes are there, and yes, from time to
yes,
time, dialogue might be cut,
right,
even
right,
though that
yeah, that
totally
makes sense.
changes things by not having Kyle's dialogue responding to
Yeah,
the one-armed man. But yeah,
yeah, it
Um,
definitely builds up fan anticipation more for the moment when he's finally going to come back.
you know what was a great and interesting find, Joel? I'm glad you asked this question. We don't talk about this enough about this part of the book, but we had interviewed John Neff,
Mm,
talking about what's the name of the song now? I can't. Star. Oh my
no
god.
stars.
No
oh
stars,
yeah,
right?
this is
So
yeah,
so John Neff tells this story about him and Lynch and Rebecca Del Rio writing No Stars and how it all came about. Well, it was interesting because you get one side of the story, and Jill, our friend Jill, who she gets an interview with Rebecca about writing No Stars and her perspective. And that was
Yeah.
a last minute insert of the
Mm,
book. I think, Ben, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it was January of 2020 you were seriously just like getting that interview and
yeah,
transcribing it because we were going to go to print in March. And
right.
that was like, you were like, Bryon, we got this, we got to put it in the book. And I'm like, I'm pulling my hair out going, oh my god, Ben, we can't do this. And
No,
you're like, but no, it's important. And I think it was because you got her side of the story, and it's a
right.
totally different spin. And
It's
and
more than a
maybe
spin. You see really her contribution because
yeah,
not to say anything about John Neff. He's a great guy, but he saw things and he just saw David Lynch
yeah,
doing so much of this, and he didn't see what Rebecca did. That she stayed up nights working and rewriting and contributing and stuff.
yeah,
And I
yeah,
think that to have these different sides, and that's true so much of the book where you could definitely clearly see people who are on Lynch's side and who's on Frost's side, and it's great to
yeah.
get to have both those sides. So you'll be like, David Lynch was so involved and he did so much, and oh, Mark Frost was so involved and he did so much, and to get to have both conversations, to have that, and not to
Yeah.
put anybody down, just to get understand where people were coming from.
yeah.
Well, I'm glad you said that because that's a perfect pivot into what I wanted to ask next, which was at what point, I guess it would be early in 2019 or something, but maybe how many interviews were before, how many after? What was the point where you knew you were gathering material for the book, not just for the podcast? Because I feel like, Ben, you in particular had certain subjects that you would ask everybody about, like the access guide. You had these questions you would ask everyone. At what point was that just something that was expressing your interest? At what point did it become like a conscious strategy of I'm going to gather different points of view and then stitch them together because it flows so nicely in the book?
So yeah, all the things you talked about were things it was just part of our podcast. But when we
Yeah.
really sat down and said we were going to do this book, I don't think, correct me if I'm wrong, Bryon, but I don't think we shared any interviews at all on the podcast once we
Right.
started making the book. So basically we were saying these interviews are only for the book. And so anyone that we and like, you know, we had things laid out. It's like, oh, we're missing information about, you know, Scott Frost and what his contribution would be. So can we get an interview for him? And you know what I mean? Like that would help this book out a lot more. But that would never be shared on the podcast, at least until after the book is done and out and stuff. So
Right.
we cut back. We went from a weekly show to, I think we were doing it bi-weekly, right? So we were doing
Yep.
like every other week we were coming out with a show, but the show would not have interviews. It would have our guests and our friends and other things that we're talking about. But I think you'd see that year, probably 2019, there was very few interviews because we were saving them for the book.
I was wondering if there were exchanges you had with people where you just emailed them a question and they sent you a response, because there are some very short quotes in the book, or like say one or two quotes from somebody that made me wonder, is there a whole phone interview out there kind of hidden away, or was it just that one exchange?
Yeah, that's a great question. I was even say early on when we first started the podcast, what we learned was just how do we get the to have conversations with cast and crew. Catherine Colson, we got an agreement from her representative that we could have 10 minutes of her time. Originally, I think she was saying, nope, we can't talk to you. And then I said 10 minutes max. And that was an agreement so that she could come on the show. And it was, you know, that was wonderful because only a few months later she passed away. So as we were making this book, there was times where people were like, no, they don't want to do an interview. All right, you don't want to do an interview. Would you give us a quote? And that's what it came down to. Sometimes it was
Okay.
sometimes it was one of these things where like I can't get this person on the phone. They're not comfortable. Some people you could give them questions ahead of time, like, hey, you know, we've talked to blah blah blah. We talked to these people. We're going to be very professional. We won't put anything you don't want on there. Here's our questions. But other times it was just more of a kind of thing like, hey, you can tell us anything you want about Twin Peaks. We'd love to have you as part of the book. And so maybe one person has a sentence or two
Okay.
words or something. And that's what, but it was still special because, you know, maybe you haven't heard from that person in a
Yeah.
long
No,
time.
it was kind of amazing. So you said there were some technical difficulties and we got cut off, but you said, Bryon, you said, I think I know exactly who you're talking about. So who did you think I was talking about?
Well, we have a wonderful quote from Laura Dern.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Oh, okay. Interesting. That
Were you-
wasn't actually.
Were you
who I
thinking of
thought-
Dern?
That
Laura
was a
Dern?
great. Okay, that was a great quote, and I won't spoil it. People have to read the book to see what you got out of her.
Yeah.
How
That was
about
a
Laura
great one.
Dern?
No, here's who I was thinking of: Isabella Rossellini.
Oh. Okay.
Yeah.
I was like, wow, is there a whole Unwrapped interview with Rossellini that I like
Wouldn't that be
missed
cool,
or
though?
something?
That was one of the things where I don't think we felt we could get, but she was willing to give us
Yeah.
a quote.
It
And
was a
what
good
cool
quote too.
What a cool quote. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
so I thought she was very open about
Yeah.
her relationship with David Lynch and about why she wasn't involved in Twin Peaks. And she could have written anything she wanted. She could have said no.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of special just to have that in
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
And some on the other end of things, you got some really rich, long interviews where you just mined tons of material. I think my favorite subject was actually the one that we all met. Well, I met him. You'd already talked to him, but that we all met together when we met up in Worcester that one time, which was Eric DeRay,
Oh,
Leo
yeah.
Johnson's actor, who for years didn't talk to anybody. And now
Right.
he's a little more active at like fan community events and things like that. And he just had some amazing material in there. Like his whole story of how he was cast, like working for his mother and just reading, and then Lynch like insisting that he do it. Like I had not heard that anywhere. And then also like he like wound up in jail on the first night of shooting. Like the scene where he's in like the Johnson house yelling at Shelley about the cigarettes. He was like fresh from jail because they'd
Yeah.
all gone out and partied the night before or something. There was just some wild stuff in there. The new, I think my favorite, and this is another one. I'll let them read the book and hear it. Was how they came up with the line "Leo needs a new pair of shoes." I did not know
Yeah,
that story. That was
Yeah.
great.
that was awesome. Right, and that's one of those things where we got to interview his mom, and I think it was probably at the end of the interview, right, Bryon? And we were just kind of
Yeah.
like, "Oh, is there any way we could talk to Eric?" I mean, I don't know if that's professional of us or not, but we were like, "Hey, it would be great if we could talk to Eric too." And she said, "I think she set us up."
Yeah. And it happened to us again when we talked to Deschanel. We said we'd love to talk to your husband, and
Right.
and
Ah,
she was like, "Oh, I'll give you his email."
it's funny that there's so many family relations in Twin Peaks,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and even with people who weren't on it but are famous. Did you interview James Roday about the Psych episode, or was that like a quote? I couldn't remember if there was like
Yeah, I
a.
think that was a quote.
Uh,
We've been trying
okay.
for years to get James as well, like because I know he was a fan, and he did the parody episode on Psych and stuff, and we were hoping, and it just never worked out and stuff. So that's what he was able to give us.
Yeah.
What inspired you to seek out the people like, for example, but others as well? The director of the music video that Catherine Coulson appeared in. That was just a really cool little bit that you put in there. And I think there were other ones like that as well, where it was somebody who not just a fan, but had sort of done something separate. I guess James Roday would be another one where he had
Hmm.
directed an episode of his TV show Psych that was like a Twin Peaks tribute. So,
I mean, I think those. I mean, like we have we have lots of ideas for podcasts, and I
Yeah.
think
yeah,
both of those came from years of saying one day we would like to have them on the show and talk about that music video or that episode of Psych. So I think they may have originally started as a podcast idea that never
yeah.
because we never able to connect, we never got to work it out, things just didn't work out, and it's like, okay, well, we might never get a podcast, but maybe we can include them in the book.
One thing I was wondering for you guys is, how do you see, like, what's your take on the post season 3 era of Twin Peaks? I don't know. Do you have like a perspective on what it's like to be living in kind of the post Twin Peaks era after it had come back? Like, it's a little different than living in the first post Twin Peaks era, I feel like. And especially for Ben, you could probably have a perspective on this because you watched the show when it was originally on.
For me, it's weird because we were in the thick of it with the book, like you said, Joel. So the show, even though the show was over, we were living it, breathing it. That's all we were focused on. And then with 2020, it was sort of like we extended our show. And
Hmm.
because Ben was focusing on the community rewatches and I was focusing on getting interviews out, I was still living and breathing it. I would spend a whole day editing a bunch of interview podcasts. Um, so I was still like I was still in it. I was still like, I would think about Twin Peaks. It was just all consuming about everything in, what we could do for the show and everything. And then this year, because obviously we stepped back from the show, we ended it, we had our final episode. um it's been nice, but it's so weird, it's quiet. It's like I
Mm.
get my Twin Peaks on Twitter or Facebook,
Hmm.
but it's we have a great group of people on Cast on Fridays, which we'll talk more about. But so it still keeps Twin Peaks in the forefront. But for me personally, it's weird. It's like I'm like, oh yeah, I have other interests. I can put my time and energy into something, other things that I've been putting off. So there's that, which is great. But it's weird. It's like a lull. It's kind of quiet.
Mm.
Anytime someone tweets an Instagram photo of a tree, everyone has their Twin Peaks season 4 speculation. So that's been fun to watch. But I mean, for me, it's weird. Twin Peaks is part of my life, but it's not all encompassing. It's not like where it was before. So it's like a perfect balance now, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
Interesting. Yeah.
right. I guess I was thinking the same thing. It feels quiet, but I
Yeah.
mean, it kind of started feeling quiet when when season 3 ended. You know, like there was so much hype and so much excitement building up to the new season 3, and there was excitement during the show while it was on, and then it ends, and it seems like so many people just kind of move on and go off to do other things, which I guess makes sense. But it's,
Yeah.
I mean, you have the diehard fans who will talk about it every day, but I feel like I feel it's quieter. I feel like there is an excitement. We feel like it. I get the sense the community feels like it's over, like there is no more Twin Peaks. And you know, when you think about it, it had over 25 years where a lot of us wanted to believe, and so you have this build up. Oh, what would it? Could we get more Twin Peaks? Could we get more Twin Peaks? And I don't know if there's a desire or even a need anymore. And so you wonder if people have moved on. And so I do kind of, we have a great community, and there's still some diehards. And like Bryon said, we have this watch party on Friday nights that we rewatch Twin Peaks and other David Lynch movies and things like that. But I don't know, you can feel something in the air that people have just moved on, and there isn't a desire and excitement, at least that I see.
I have some questions about that, some skepticism maybe, which I think we're going to share in the Patreon part of this conversation. But before we get to that, you mentioned the screenings that you're doing every Friday. Can you talk about that a little bit for the YouTube audience, so that people can know where to find that and how to join in with that effort as well, and anything else that you want to mention before we go just for the patrons?
Yeah. So, I mean, right around the 30th anniversary of the pilot of Twin Peaks, I was talking with some of the community, and they said, wouldn't it be cool if we could all watch the pilot together? You know, like, and we found this service, Cast, with a Kast, which allows us to go to a private area virtually and chat and host and show any types of videos we want. And so it started with the pilot, and then we just said, hey, why don't we keep going? And we went through the whole series and the movie and the season 3 and all of that. And then I think, like for us, that was great. And I mean, I forgot how long that took. I think it took a few months for us to do the whole thing. And
Right.
then and then I think we stepped back, but Diana, one of the from the community, said she'd keep it going. So I know they reran it again, the whole thing. And then recently we've been showing David Lynch movies, and sometimes Bryon and I will show up, and sometimes we'll host. And like thinking like in September we might do Blue Velvet and Elephant Man, and maybe in October we'll do Dune. But we're showing David Lynch movies, and I think at some point there's talk about rerunning all of Twin Peaks again.
And
when we were hosting it, we tried to make it special. I mean, they do that already, but we deleted scenes and commercials and just all kinds of extras. And sometimes we would be able to get some of the casting crew to come on, and they would do a video recording for us, and we would share it with the community. And we actually did get Kyle MacLachlan, and he came back as Dale Cooper, and he says, I hear that people are doing this watching Twin Peaks together or something like that. But he was like so cool that he would actually make a video just for these watch parties on Fridays. And he did that. And this is still crazy too. David Lynch, who we've reached out to him many times for an interview. He was so cool, and he did a video for like the last run of our watch party, like when we were just about ending the first run of Twin Peaks. And that was crazy that he would take some time and do that just for the community. And this is during the pandemic, so I think he wanted to be there and encourage and just do something nice for the community.
He had no choice, Ben. Like, he was already making videos, so I was like, this is the perfect.
Right, you're doing your weather reports and what number it is, and you're already doing that. Could you also no, that was so cool.
Yeah,
so nice.
Yeah. Those things did happen, and then now with Diana, she's picked up that mantle from you, Ben, and she's been having the community will make videos. I've made videos, and she's doing like getting to know everybody, which is kind of really cool because you're getting to know everybody in the chat, their personalities, what do they like, stuff like that. So that's been a lot of fun too. So it's like, it always makes it every Friday, there's always something new and different. And for people who are interested in ever joining, we always put the link on Twin Peaks Unwrapped Facebook and Twitter. Every week we do share that information, and the link to the cast is always there. So that's how you find it.
Yeah,
You
and
wanna be
we're
part
really
of it.
good. I mean, we say it's a private private group, but we've always allowed everybody in, and unless they're difficult and giving other people a hard time, we'll include you in the group. I mean,
For people to join in, they can go to at Twin Peaks Unwrap. It's just ends with the P, not the double PED, right? On
Mhm.
Twitter.
Mhm.
right.
Okay. And then Twin Peaks Unwrapped on Facebook, and they can join the fun from there.
Yeah,
Right.
there'll be a link there. We
Great.
post every week a link about
All right.
for the cast. Yeah, keep Twin Peaks alive.
Excellent. And so, okay, so speaking of Twin Peaks Alive, speaking of David Lynch making a video, and speaking of whether the fans have moved on and it's all over for Twin Peaks, let's get into that. This is just a taste of the full conversation, which runs for another 51 minutes on patreon.com/lost in the movies. If you join for $5 a month, you'll get access to this and all the extended conversations I'll be conducting every month from now on. There's actually 2 coming up this month. In this particular conversation, we go on to discuss the possibility of season 4, what we would look for in more Lynch material, whether we think that's what he's doing right now in his mysterious production schedule. They also turn the tables on me and ask me some questions about how I got into movies. We discuss the show and comic The Max that they talked about once on their podcast, and also just how podcasts kind of linger in our memory in a way. We get kind of mystical about it. This sense memory you get when you listen, you see a podcast that you listened to years ago, and you can remember exactly where you were and what you were doing and everything. So we get into a lot of different stuff in this. Plus, also MTV, South Park. Shows that they watched, sketch comedies in the 90s, stuff they grew up on with TV, and how that compared to Twin Peaks, and much more. I think I'm forgetting a lot of other stuff too. So definitely sign up, become a patron. You'll help support my work there, and also on this channel, Journey Through Twin Peaks and all of that. And you'll also have access to hundreds of hours of other podcasts as well that are available to all tiers on there, plus the Lost in Twin Peaks episode guide that I've been doing every month since January 2019. That's going to start to go public in a month, but it's going to slowly unveil over a year. If you want to jump in and hear all that now, it's the perfect time. I actually just released my Fire Walk with Me episode. These conversations, these personal discussions I do on there, there's just so much of it for you to dig into. So I hope you become a patron there. And thank you for listening to this as well.